Welcome back, everybody, to your daily update on the state of the Malazan Empire. And this is the other half of Book 1 of the Crippled God we're going to deal with today. That's chapters 3 and 4. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Cheers. All right. So, overall, I want to start with some overall observations on the structure of book 1 of the Crippled God, and that is as a continuation of the events of Dust of Dreams, especially the Battle of the Bone Hunters against the Naruk, right? The Kachane Naruk. We when we looked at it at the end of Dust of Dreams, we did not know if anyone survived that battle, right? We left it unfinished in a way. We then saw, obviously, I think there were some hints that there were some survivors, but mostly we didn't know. We then ended with the Naruk being annihilated by the Kachane Jamal under Stormy and Gessler. And now that we return to all of that in these first 4 chapters, what Erikson does, and I feel this is very important and cleverly done, is that he does not start up with us being back with the survivors of the Bone Hunters. No, he slowly circles back to that, right? The first we hear about him is the conversation that Mael and what's his name, Karul have on the matter, right? That's the first we hear of it, and how impressive their last stand was, and so forth. And then we hear about people trying to follow them. That is Masan Gilani and the rest of the survivors of the Unbound. And then we have a conversation so slowly from chapter to chapter, we're getting closer to it, right? We have some survivors at the end of chapter 2, that is Bottle and Ruth and Good. And they know that we learned that there are survivors of the Bone Hunters. We still don't know how many. And then we come to the point where we hear about how those people who have heard about the battle and what happened to the Bone Hunters and how they fought the Naruk, how they feel about it, how they dare not fully approach the Bone Hunters, how they worship the Bone Hunters in a way, and so forth. And then when we come to the Bone Hunters in chapter 4, we then learn that it's the same within the Bone Hunters, with those the regular infantry, not the heavies and not the Marines, who were still outside of the actual battle. And how you have that scene when it's bomb squad sitting out there and having their conversation, and then the regulars showed up and kind of give them food and stuff because they worship the Marines. And I just wanted to point out that way it is structured, that we as readers are slowly circling closer to that, to the survivors of the Bone Hunters and the survivors of the Marines and Heavies, who have been our main focus within the Bone Hunters army, right? It was Fiddler's squad, it was Stormy's and Gessler's squad, Bomb squad, Hellion, Herb, those people, right? Those were the point of view characters that we spent most time with ever since, basically House of Chains, and more within the Bone Hunters and then Reaper's Gale. Those, and obviously Dust of Dreams, those were our people, and we actually show up with them last, in a way, to give us more impact of how terrible that battle was, and also how much it kind of removed them from everyone else, or made them into something special. So we really carefully approach those people at the center of it. It's almost like stalking them in a way, until you actually arrive at that point and can look at how it's like when you have a wound and you carefully get closer to it, to prod it and figure out how it hurts or how bad it hurts. It's very much the same way done in the narrative when we look at which people we focus on one after the other. And yeah, that's just something that I felt was incredibly well done. But we're now back at that point and almost at the actual parley between Queen of Bristol and all the other like war chiefs. And once again, it's like the adjunct. It's like it's even mentioned that it's basically apart from Bryce Benedict, it's all women there. I don't know, obviously Spax, but that's about it. So yeah, and Tanakalian, obviously. So just pointing that out. But apart from that, I felt like it's important to look at the fact how through the story, like just like the choice of like scenes, we are carefully approaching that like gaping wound of the bone hunters that where we left them at the end of Dust of Dreams. And yeah, I feel that is like what gives the battle against the Naruk even more meaning or more impact, that we're not just, picking up with the survivors at the end, like in like the first scene of the Crippled God, which would probably be the way you do that if it was like in a TV show. You end with that cliffhanger of that battle against the Naruk, and then like the next season you start with the survivors. But since this is like literature and not just a TV show, we have this opportunity to slowly, go there and thus, give that battle more meaning or more impact, in a way, and make sure that once we actually reconnect with those people that we've spent so much time with in the books before, once we approach them again, once we're reunited with them, we fully appreciate the huge impact the battle had on them. So yeah, that's like the first thing that I wanted to point out this time around. And obviously, there's a few more interesting things going on in that book. Small bits. There is that one like short scene with Shirk Elal, and she's looking at Skorgan Kaban, her first mate, clumping over the deck. And yeah, that moment where she's just thinking like sometimes facing death is easy, but facing life is actually more difficult. Of course, that's true for a lot of us. That's true, and it's once again one of those moments where you realize that there is more to say about that than just like in your average fantasy series where like all the heroes are always facing off against death. And yeah, depending on your life circumstances, that's the easy bit, facing like everyday life with all the all those tedious problems that you can't do anything about it, right? That's like Skorgan with like all his missing body parts. He must have like a terrible life, all things considered. So for him, that probably is more of a struggle than just dying. But as we've seen before, humans don't die easy, and we probably just choose the other route because it's part of our nature in a way. Anyway, I just wanted to point that one out because I figured that's a really interesting, like offhand comment, almost like it's almost like one short line and then it's gone again, and then we face other things. But I feel it's important to look at that. There's more interesting things here. Um, One then obviously is we see further how Sin as a character is basically spiraling out of control, becoming less and less human, less and less constrained by morals or other things like that. It will be something that we need to look at in the future, I guess. But it's important to be aware of like how it like proceeds step by step. Like every time she opens herself up and does magic things, like brutal magic things, she's losing more and more of her humanity in a way. Um, yeah, not that much more going on with the chain yet. I mean, we learn more about the Forkful Assail. At least some people are now aware that they're going to fight Forkful Assail. But that's basically like everyone is scared shitless out of the Forkful Assail. Which, once again, I feel is one of those things that are like done really well because you don't realize it. Like, I mean, it takes until the end of, like, basically until the last book, until the Crippled God, that you realize that the like final adversaries in a way will be Fulcral Assail. And when you think back, like the first times we meet Fulcral, like the very first time we meet Fulcral Assail or a Fulcral Assail is a single one. I think it's even calm. I'm not quite sure because I'm dumb and I don't remember shit. I think it's calm, the one that we meet, like the one that is the viewpoint character in chapter 2 when she, what is it, even chapter 1? It's chapter 1 already when she like ties down Icarium to keep him as like a weapon of last resort. It's and calm, if that's her, and I'm not, once again I'm not quite sure. She's the one, the first one we meet, right? And that is in House of Chains, when Karsa and Bayroth and Delum pick her, like free her from under that rock, right? That's the first time we meet her. And we see what she does to Delum Thord, and now we realize, now we know what kind of fighters those Toblikai are. That gives us a first view at how absolutely frightening and brutal the Forkful Assail are. Like the next time we meet one is that Forkful Assail we meet in Midnight Tides. Once again, I've lost his, forgot his name because it was like once again like something like peace or whatever. You know, they all have these like frighteningly wonderful names. Is that village with those two Kenilra? I always confused it, like with those two demon princes who later become farmers, and Troll Sengar and Fierce Sengar and Roulette Sengar and at least one Karisnan. And they also just barely managed to defeat or at least chase away that Forkful Assail there. So, like, we've seen like individual Forkful Assails before in like several situations, and now we finally realize that those are the people that the Bone Hunters and their allies will be up against. We've had like 10 books, or at least like several books. Okay, let's say it's kind of changed. So we have like 6 books to get ready for the fact that those are probably the most brutal motherfuckers in that entire world, apart from like, you know, specific gods. So it's once again, the way they are built up is not like, we don't know that those will be the final adversaries. We don't know that until like very late in the series, which is, you know, like the last book. And the way that is all worked out, I feel, is like really impressive. Because by the time we find out, we should be pretty scared of them. So yeah, there's that. To just appreciate like how it's constructed as an overall story. All right. What else is interesting to look at? The conversation that Erenict and Bryce Benedict have about love, I felt is an incredibly important one. The idea that how did I say it, like that Erenict has found a specific way to look at Bryce Benedict that no one else has, or the other way around. That's a very interesting and very good like definition of love, how love works or doesn't work. It's after you've grown on someone like mold, and is the point that you see something in that other person, like have that specific view of your lover or the person you love that no one else has. That very specific approach, that very special one, where you see things, know things, or appreciate things in a way that other people can't. And ideally, that other person has that with you as well. And it's important to be aware of that. That is a also very much about opening yourself up to the other person when it comes to like vulnerability. I think she says that something like all your defenses are down when I look at you through that specific, like in that specific way. But I felt like for a definition, not a definition, but a description of how love works, it's really important because it is about very like I'm probably the worst person possible to talk about love. But anyway, it is very much about having that very special view or like image of that person you love in your heart, in your mind, whatever, that other people don't have. And yeah, I just found that like an interesting discussion there, the way they have it. And it's once again one of those points where Steven Erikson manages to have a romance develop in a way that is very special, because it's once again it's very much grown up people. It's not, they're no teenagers. They're like, I don't know how old they are, but it's from like, I don't know, hints and so forth. I would say that both Bryce and Aronik might be around their like late 20s, early 30s, something like that, I guess. But yeah, the point when you're actually able to have a conversation about love that goes beyond just like hormones, I guess. And I know I just found that in a very interesting aspect of it. Another person we need to talk about is Blizdig. Um, I feel Blizdig is a perfect example for what Chancellor of Moonspawn recently spoke about characters with vulnerabilities or weaknesses that are not able to, just go out and fight the world anyways. And we have that long start of this, like, of his viewpoint when he's like regretting all the things that happened to him and how he blames the adjunct for all these things. And I feel it's important to understand that. Like Blistic is not a, like, he's aware of the fact that he's not a bad person, or he wasn't. He was a good soldier at some point. He was aware of that. And it's all about like levels of competence and circumstances, right? It's like each of us humans has like strengths and weaknesses. That's just part of like being human. And each of us has ideally a like ideally we find a place in life where we can live out our strength without being forced to deal too much with our weaknesses, our level of like competence and so forth. Fulfilling that is obviously, and living in that point, that sweet spot is obviously good. It's almost like Aristotelian in a way when you look at the idea that you have a specific telos that you need to fulfill and that you're made for. The problems arise when we are forced by circumstances or whatever to go out of that. I don't want to say comfort zone, because it's much more than just a comfort zone. The idea of comfort zone I always find problematic, because it means like you're just like, playing like you're basically playing child and not want to actually face up those things. But that's not how it works. Sometimes we are just unable to deal with changed circumstances. Sometimes we don't have the capacity to become that other person that is now required for new circumstances. So the fact that Blizdig, who was a competent, good guard commander for the city guard in Erin, is not a competent fist for an army on the move, especially for a fist on the march. Now that, like, outside of, firm rules, outside of like the purview of the empire and all of that, that is not something that he should be blamed for. Now he's going to blame the adjunct, and that's, I guess, the other part. There's some truth to that. Like, right, she knows that he's in way over his head. He can't do these things. Maybe he could do some things better. That's possible. But to expect the impossible from people, as Bryce Benedict has pointed out in like an earlier conversation during Dusted Dreams, is something that commanders can try to do. The question, however, is what happens if those people are just not able to do that impossible thing? Would it have been better to just, dismiss Blizdig? I don't know why she hasn't done that. Probably lack of whatever. I guess we need to talk about the weaknesses of Tavor and the failures of Tavor Paran at some point, because it's so easy to have all that respect for her, which is important, obviously. But the way that she has like all these pressures, built up all these walls, and locked herself in that room. We have all these wonderful metaphors about the wardrobe and all these other things during Dusted Dreams and before. It's like that certainly makes her not the best commander for the army. She's relying on other people to do that for her, and Blizdig is just not one of them. So having that long awakening of Blizdig and realizing that how deep he is in over his head, and how he's like being forced into these situations, has brought out the worst in him, in a way, and turned him into a very despicable person already. That just is, I don't know. I feel bad for the dude, and I say that even knowing what will happen to him in the future. Is like, I feel bad for the guy, because yeah, sometimes we are in such impossible situations where we just humanly can't cope with the things that are asked from us. So I guess, my point here is spare a thought for Captain Blizdig, or Fist Blizdig. He didn't ask for this, and he apparently can't cope and can't, grow over his like limitations. He can't do that, and that's sad. So yeah, there's all of that, and I feel like that's basically enough for today. I'll be back tomorrow with more Crippled God. Until then, enjoy your Tuesday evening. Cheers.